Wait a minute. Hello there, folks, and welcome to Trasnatira and Limavady Area Ancestry with Reclaim the Enlightenment. Now, today we're joined by Julie Kane and John Gray. John Gray's today, as most people know, is the anniversary of John Steinbeck's birth in 1902. He was born in California, and he's written a number of books which were made into screen face. So John's going to give us a wee 5 to 10 minute talk on John Steinbeck, and then we'll introduce Julie Kane. Okay, over to you now, John. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I'm not here as a great expert on John Steinbeck, but I can tell you about his influence on me. However, I have done a tiny little bit of homework. John Steinbeck is descended on his maternal side from the Hamiltons. His grandfather was baptized in Ballykelly Presbyterian Church in, I think, Stephen, correct me if I'm wrong, 1830, and he emigrated. He emigrated to the United States at the age of 17 in a fateful year, 1847. Now, my suspicion would be that he wasn't a destitute emigrant, that the family had a farm, and they were bad times. So they thought, well, let's send our son out to the States, possibly with a little bit of money, and see if he can make his way there. And he duly did. And I mean, by the time John Steinbeck arrives on the scene at the beginning of the following century, his parents are essentially middle-class professionals. So the family, and by the way, his grandfather married into a German family, and so hence you get Steinbeck. But of his ancestors, John looked back to his grandfather in particular and had a sort of romantic notion of the Irish as great storytellers. And it appears that his grandfather was a great storyteller. Now, when I say that, I think it's a reasonable deduction without doing more research on the matter that back in Ireland, the family had some measure of prosperity. My reason for deducing this is that in 1952, John Steinbeck set about following up his Irish connection. Unfortunately, he was too late to meet any of his surviving ancestors because the last 3 members of the family, who all lived together on a farm at, and I may get the pronunciation wrong here, at Mcgill near Ballykelly, the last of them had died out 2 years before he arrived. But it was a 200-acre farm, you know, which was a substantial sized farm. So, I mean, one of my reflections about this, it's clear that on his mother's side, well, the name Hamilton's a giveaway. Yes, the Ulster Scots can claim him, I think, for sure. And I have to say that of all the many heroes that the Ulster Scots, and they mainly are heroes, that the Ulster Scots tradition tries to make much of, John Steinbeck is one of the most honourable of them all. Not he an Indian killer, not he a hero of empire building or military endeavours, but actually a very fine novelist who charted and chronicled the sufferings of the underclass in the New World. And of course, in his most famous work, The Grapes of Wrath, the sort of horrendous tale of the Joad family, who faced in the first place natural disaster in the Dust Bowl of Oklahoma, were surrounded by rapacious rack renters who, when tenants couldn't pay their rent soon enough, evicted them, looked to the promised land of California and find nothing but more exploitation there, but retained their dignity through that great odyssey. And it's 600 pages of a great odyssey. And to come back to my sort of personal connection with this, I note that Steinbeck won the Nobel Prize in 1962, and largely because of the reputation of The Grapes of Wrath, which had been published in 1939. I think it was about 1962, when I would have been 15, that I came across The Grapes of Wrath. Was it my parents who gave it to me as a present? Did I get it at school? Slightly unlikely, I think, given the school I was at. But I mean, I read it avidly, and it was perhaps my first introduction to an account of, how ordinary people can be afflicted by natural disasters and then exploited on every step of the way through life by the rapacious classes. I mean, simultaneously, in that year, I do know that I read another work of non-fiction, actually of non-fiction, and in this case, of direct relevance to Ireland, in Cecil Woodham Smith's great book, The Great Hunger, which, gave the first and absolutely excoriating account of the famine, which actually had probably propelled Steinbeck's grandfather from Ireland to the States. But again, you have a story of a natural disaster in which there is a cold-heartedness and a ruthlessness amongst those who might have or who could have assisted in the circumstances, and indeed often exploited the fleeing and destitute all along the way. I suppose in my coming to an understanding of the plight of the rural poor, I would sort of count in my kind of the genesis of my thoughts on these subjects. I would bring in one other book, which is Patrick Mcgill's Children of the Dead End, which was first published in 1914. Mcgill was from Glenteese in County Donegal, and his early novels are excoriating chronicles of the fate of the landless labourers and the poor tenants, and they're desperate. They're having to migrate to Scotland to pick the potatoes, having to go to the herring fairs in County Derry, and all along the way, not much joy for them. And I mean, I'm Belfast based, and one of the reasons why understanding what happened to the rural poor is that it helps to explain why Belfast's unskilled working class were so poorly paid and so badly looked after, simply because there was a constant tide of the destitute flooding into the town, then city, from the countryside. So all these things connect up. But John Steinbeck is very definitely up there as one of the greatest chroniclers of this kind of misfortune. So there you have my personal testimony. So good for you, organizing a little festival on behalf of the guy.
Thank you very much for that excellent wee introduction there to this Zoom talk. Thank you very much. So now we're going on to our next speaker is Julie Kane. Julie is an Irish-American poet who's the great-grandchild of John Kane. Now, if anybody knows Magilligan, they'll know the different townlands off by heart near enough. Now, John farmed the townland called the Claggan, and just in front of Ballerina Primary School, in front of the Church of Ireland Manse. That was his big field there. So she's a past Louisiana poet laureate and Fulbright scholar. So really, without further ado, I'll hand you over to Julie. Thank you, Julie, for coming on.
Thank you so much. Thank you to the sponsors of this event, and especially to Stephen, who has helped me so much finding more about my Kane and O'Kane ancestors. And thank you, John, for that wonderful talk, which is so valuable for learning more about Steinbeck. I'm going to see if I can share my screen in a minute, but basically my talk is going to be in 3 parts. I'm going to talk about the O'Kanes who remained in Ireland, who were in Northern Ireland. And I'm going to talk about the Kanes and O'Kanes in the United States who emigrated. And at the very end, I'll just read a few of my poems. But let's see if I can share screens without a hitch here. Let's see. All right. And okay, can everyone see that? Good. And okay, this part, apologies to those in Northern Ireland for my stating the obvious, but I thought that the Americans might need to know a little bit about the geography here. This is a map of the entire island of Ireland, and the little red section at the top is County Derry, Londonderry. And within County Derry, Londonderry, the little black tip there is Magilligan Parish, which is where my O'Kanes were from. You can see it's right across Lough Foyle, a saltwater estuary from the North Atlantic from County Donegal. This is a beautiful picture of Magilligan Strand. I haven't been there yet. As soon as this pandemic is over, that is where I am headed. You might notice the little tower at the top of the picture is a Martello Tower. It was built in the very early 1800s. The purpose was to protect against invasion by Napoleon. Apparently it wasn't finished until a few years after Napoleon's exile, but during World War II, it was outfitted again to help protect the coast. So a lot of fascinating history in this area. And you can see where my dad got his, I think he has an ancestral love of the sea. He loved the ocean and would wade into the ocean every summer and drink a great big gulp of salt water and say it cures everything. Let's see, my next slide. And this is Magilligan Parish is known for St. Aydens, which is a medieval church, but it's these ruins date, I think, back to the 13th century. But before that, it was a pre-Christian religious site. There's a holy well located on the property where people would come to, to drink the water and be cured of illnesses. St. Aydin, who was a follower of St. Patrick, is buried there, according to legend. And the property is right near my ancestors' property in Claggan Townland in Magilligan Parish. Apologies for this crest, which is not historical. I just wanted to show that the names are the same. O'Kane, various spellings, O'Kane, became Kane in America when sadly many immigrants figured out quite quickly that they were being discriminated against for being Irish and tried to drop the O to appear less Irish, but all the same name. The crest, and again, I know that's not historical. These things, involved registration with, you had to register your arms, and so, but in all depictions of O'Kane crests or coats of arms, you always see the fish. And one of my sister's boyfriends once asked my father, he said, why are there fish on your crest? Is that because the Kanes drink like fish? And he wasn't far off there. But the O'Kanes were a very large and dominant sept in Northern Ireland. They were originally from County Donegal. They crossed over Lough Foyle by, I think, about the 12th century into northern Derry. And that part of Derry was actually called O'Kane's country. In 1642, there was, as many of you know, an uprising against British rule. You can see these were O'Kane captains and the numbers of men that they mustered. There was an enormous battle. They were defeated, but they've been called the last northern tribe to stand against the English. You can probably see where me and my sisters get a little bit of our stubbornness there. This is a transcript, which I could probably go to jail for sharing because you're not supposed to copy them. But anyhow, it's a transcript of my great-grandfather's baptismal record from St. Aydens in Magilligan. You can see his parents are William Kane and Ellen Collins, November 1848. His father, well, let me say his grandfather was Richard Kane, and you can find him in the 1826 Tithe Allotments. Steve McCracken also found him on some early 1800s rent rolls for the Haygate landlords. He was apparently dead by 1831 because in the surviving 1831 census of Clagan, there's just a widow O'Kane with 8 people in her household. But Richard's son, William O'Kane, who married Ellen O'Collins, farmed 23 acres altogether. Not little, not substantial, just enough to get by. 11 acres in Clagan townland and 12 acres in the immediately adjacent Drumnahay townland. And William died in December 1886. He made out a will 4 years before that, and it's actually online in the Public Records Office of Northern Ireland. You can find it. He left his farm to his eldest son, Richard, but the really charming thing, he left little bequests of like £3 sterling to each of his grandchildren with the names of himself or his late wife who would predeceased him. He left £3 to Ellen McGeehan, Ellen Mccloskey, Ellen McPoyle, and to William O'Kane, his son Hugh's son. He didn't know that he had a grandchildren, William and Ellen, in the United States, apparently by then, which is kind of sad. See my next slide. Oh, those are, you can see on this map the towns. See Clagan on the bottom and Drumnahay on the top. And if you see the number 4 and 5, those were the 2 little lots that William farmed east from the Haygates, the rich landlords, of course. And to the right of the 4, you can see Glebland. That was actually the church property there. Okay. Oh, Okay, this is a little section of William's will in his handwriting, which you can find online. This is the modern house that now stands on the property that belonged to my ancestors, or that was leased by my ancestors. Back in, I guess, 2013, I had started corresponding with the editor of the Winding Row magazine, which came out of the Row Valley region. His name was Michael Higgins, and he engaged a Limavady taxi driver to kind of scout out the location of my family's farm. And they found this, and they spoke to a neighbor whose mother was actually a cousin of the farm servant to whom my great-grandfather's brother left the farm. Sounds kind of complicated, but anyhow, this house, it's modern, but if you look to the left of the front door, one window is obscured, but you can see two of them. That is part of the original wall of the original farmhouse. And apparently, in order to get a building grant, they had to incorporate that part of the wall into the construction of the new house. And the woman who lives there now told James Mullen, the taxi driver, that that wall is very thick relative to the rest of the house. And the house, when my great-grandfather's brother Richard, who was a bachelor, died, he had no children. He had, never married. He had a farm servant named James Payne who lived with him, I think, in Honeywell. Excuse me for butchering pronunciations. I read this stuff, but I never get to talk about it with anyone and get corrected. But when Richard died, he left the farm to his farm servant, James Payne. And James Mullen, who was sent to scout out this property, talked to someone, whose mother had been a relative of the Paynes, and was told that oftentimes Richard could not afford to pay James Payne for his work, but he always said, "Son, I will take care of you when I die." And he did. He left him this property. James in turn left it to a married niece when he died. And I'm not sure whether it's still in her family or whether she sold it, but that's the story of the property. I wanted to talk a little bit about the siblings of my great-grandfather, John, who stayed in Ireland. I've just talked about Richard, who was the eldest, who got the farm, bachelor. The next down was Hugh O'Kane. He was a laborer in Ballykelly. You might recognize some of these, Bro Harris, Carsall, Ballykelly, but he married a woman named Margaret Miskimmins there. They had 10 children, and one of the girls married a man named Daniel Craig, emigrated to Scotland with him, and I've got a very strong DNA match to one of their descendants, which is a lot of fun. But and again, if anyone knows any descendants of these people, please let me know. It would be so wonderful to find out. Next down, third child was Ellen. Ellen married Philip McCoyle from Clagan. He was a publican on Main Street in Limavady, but eventually they moved back to Clagan after Ellen died very young. They had two girls, both single, never married. One lived with Richard, my great-grandfather's brother, and kept house for him. Fourth down was Sarah O'Kane. She also married a publican of Limavady. His name was Bernard Mccloskey, and he had a pub on Market Street in Limavady. Bernard died pretty young in 1893, but Sarah kept running it along with her daughters, especially her daughter Rose. And I don't know if the site is still there. Again, if someone can tell me, but Market Street, a pub on Market Street in Limavady. One of their children was Mary Jane Mccloskey. She married Alexander Love from Limavady when she was, shall I spill the family secret? She was 6 months pregnant at the time. He was Protestant, she was Catholic. He converted in order to marry her. Their little boy, born, just 3 months after the wedding, sadly died. He only lived a month. He died. But then they had a girl named, they had a girl named Isabella, and I'll get into that in a minute. But Alexander was an auctioneer in Limavady. This is an ad for his business. And again, if anyone, I think he died in 1956. There might be some people who knew of the business. In later years, I know when he became quite old, I think his nephew, Victor Love, ran the business after him. Let's see. And this is their daughter, Isabel. Peggy lived until quite recently, until 2006. And I'm told by James Mullen, the Scout taxi driver, that she had a little shop in Limavady. She lived on Main Street, and he said her shop was Row Mill Street. Does that make sense? A little possibly grocery store. But again, if anyone knows anything, please tell me when you get a chance. Next down was John, my great-grandfather. I'll skip him for the time being. Then Mary married Neil McGeehan from Carbolian. They had 2 daughters. Ellen married a Limavady man. That seemed to be very popular with the Kane girls, those irresistible Limavady men. Ellen married Thomas Maley. They had 7 children, 2 of whom died in infancy. She died after giving birth to the 7th, but 3 of her sons wound up emigrating to Australia, James, John, and a girl, and Ellen. And their daughter, Anne Eliza, also married a Limavady man. William John Brady was a constable. And according to their marriage certificate, his father, John, was a gentleman of Limavady. They never had any children, but they traveled around Ireland because of his job. Now, Mary O'Kane Magilligan lost her husband. He died quite young, but then she remarried. She remarried a carpenter in Londonderry City named John McKeever. She had 1 more child, a daughter named Catherine, and then she disappears from records. And if anyone knows anything, please let me know the story. There may also have been a Patrick. There's a Patrick listed on one of those 1841-51 census search forms when Richard O'Kane, the eldest, was trying to prove his age to get a pension. But I've never found any trace of him. Again, if anyone knows anything about Patrick, please let me know. Now coming to the US. Let's see, my great-grandfather, I wanted to talk first about, William, I'm sorry. I didn't mention William O'Kane, next down from Mary, another child of William and Ellen, emigrated to New York City. He left Northern Ireland, emigrated to New York City, married Abigail Twomey. They had 1 little boy, and again, this is so sad in the cities, especially in the US, so many children died in infancy. But they had a little boy who died, the same day he was born. But they also had a daughter named Abigail, born in 1885 in Philadelphia before they moved to New York. And Abigail, known as Gail Kane, became a silent film star in the United States. She was in 20 films between 1913 and 1918. originally in New York. Then she moved out to the Los Angeles, Hollywood area with her mother. She also acted on Broadway in films. In 1927, she was starring in one, I think called, was it The Captive? The Captive. There was a vice raid that night. She was arrested, and in that very same raid, Mae West was picked up. Mae West was then starring in the play called Sex. So you can bet that that one got raided. Here's some posters and images of Gail Kane, whose father was from Magilligan Parish. Gail Kane, she didn't have a long career because she found a rich man, Henry Ottman, whose father had founded a meat packing company. So she married her rich man, retired to Maine, lived to the age of 80, had a daughter, and again, with whom I've had a very strong DNA match and exchanged correspondence with. Now, getting to my great-grandfather, John O'Kane. He was in the Boston, Massachusetts area by 1874. He married Sarah Brown, and believe it or not, she was a daughter of the Galway landed gentry. Her fourth great-grandfather, who was my seventh great-grandfather, was a Galway shipping merchant who in 1652, Gregory Brown signed the refusal list, refusing to surrender Galway to Cromwell's forces. His properties, ships, business, everything was seized. He was, evicted and transplanted to rural Galway, Clonburn Parish. But in 1682, his son, Anthony Brown, son of Gregory, by then, of course, the British crown had been restored. Those who had been loyal to the crown against, the Parliament forces were rewarded in many cases for their stand. And so Anthony Brown, son of Gregory, was granted the deed to 500 acres in Clonburn Parish, including Fort Brown, where they had their home, and 3 other townlands. This is a photograph of Fort Brown in the 1990s, long after it had fallen into ruin, but you can see it was still very beautiful. Now the catch, how did John O'Kane from Magilligan Parish wind up marrying a daughter of landed gentry? Well, the answer is because they were as broke as the Kanes then. They had lost everything, particularly in the famine years. And they lost all their properties in the landed estate auctions of the 1850s. There's a letter in an archive in the Republic of Ireland from my second great-grandfather, Gregory Brown, Sarah's father, begging for a job on the railroad, which he didn't get. They wound up emigrating to the US. Poor Gregory died, broke in 1870 in New York City. But anyhow, John O'Kane married Sarah. And let's see. Okay, I don't have any photographs of John O'Kane or his wife from Ireland, but this is their son, John Edward Kane, my grandfather. They also had a son named William, who had a big family, who has many, many descendants today. And they had 2 girls, Ellen and Isabella, one of whom never married, and one of whom married a bachelor late in life, but did not take to marriage. There was a census about 2 years after she married this, widower, married a widower with kids. She married him, and about 2 years later, you can see her back living with her sister again. Like she did not like married life at all. But anyhow, this is John Edward Kane, my grandfather, a son of John from Ireland. He drove a horse-drawn vegetable cart in Faneuil Market in Boston. That was his profession. And apparently, according to family stories, when the automobile came in the 20th century, he was unable to get the hang of driving it, and he had to switch over to market sales from driving. He was called a teamster, and that was news to me that we think today of teamsters as being truck drivers, but the word comes from driving a team of horses, and he was a member of, of the teamsters at the time. John Edward, his horse was named Harvey, and my dad and his siblings loved to get rides on Harvey. Let's see. This is John Edward dressed up in his Sunday best with my grandmother, Agnes, of course, Irish as well. And this is Faneuil Market around early 20th century, and you can see the wagons and horses being pulled. That's exactly what John Edward did, and he may well be in that picture if you look closely enough. I'm getting to my dad, Edwin Kane, who was born in 1924, and he graduated from high school, of course, just during World War II, was drafted, and of course he was from a poor family. His mother had worked in a factory before marriage. His father, drove that vegetable cart, and coming out of high school, the Army gave him an IQ test, and he scored high on it. He had those county dairy brains, although no money. And so they put him in a program called ASTP. It's Army Specialized Training Program. It was a special program that was supposed to train men in medicine, dentistry, engineering, and something else I forget. And some of the other people in it were Henry Kissinger was part of it, Mel Brooks, the film director, Blazing Saddles, Young Frankenstein, Gore Vidal, and surprisingly enough, Kurt Vonnegut. So my father was sent to Harvard University for a year. Now, he lorded it over his family, like, I'm the Harvard man now, you peons. But the fact is that his life was much more rigorous than that of someone at any of the military academies, West Point or the Naval Academy. He not only had a curriculum that crammed 4 years of engineering study into 20 to 24 months, but also it was like boot camp. They had to jump out of bed at the crack of dawn and run and do push-ups and march to classes and stay in uniform and all that kind of stuff. But sadly, in early in 1944, the Army was short of infantry troops, and they shut down the ASTP program, and they dumped all of those men mostly into the infantry. I think they kept like dentistry going, but that was about all. And my father wound up in the 101st Infantry, not airborne, but 101st Infantry Regiment of the 26th Infantry Yankee Division of Patton's 3rd Army. This is a map that showed their maneuvers across Europe from November 1944 to May 1945. He actually landed in France in August 1944. This is from the Wikipedia entry about the 101st Infantry Regiment's participation in the Battle of the Bulge. My dad was never one. He had 4 battle stars, including the Battle of the Bulge, which is Ardennes. He was never one to talk about his World War II experience. Like many veterans, he preferred to just bottle it up and keep it to himself. But he did say, I know we were curious about the Battle of Bulge and asked him about it, and he did say that they had been engaged in fighting. They were on R&R in Metz in France, and he and some of his buddies were actually in a bar in town. They had leave to go into town. They were drinking beers when a sergeant showed up and rounded them up. Come on, we got to go, we got to march. And that actually, his story corresponds to a few sentences before that in the Wikipedia entry, which says, let's see, on 13 December, the German garrison surrendered. The troops of the 101st Infantry enjoyed much deserved R&R in Metz. However, on 19 December, the regiment was called up again to help stop a German breakthrough in Belgium and Luxembourg. And then if you want to go to the Wikipedia entry, you can read, he was in the second battalion. This is, I have the letters that my father wrote home from World War II to his mother and sister. This one is V-mail. It was kind of short-lived, but there was an attempt by the Army to try to lower the weight on planes that were carrying the mail, I guess, back to the United States from Europe. So they would microfilm letters, and the men had to write them on these little teeny tiny, rectangles, and they would microfilm them, and they would, bring the microfilm, I guess, to the U.S. and then print it out for the families to read as V-mail for Victory Mail. This is my dad's discharge record. If you look closely, you can see Company G, 101st Infantry Regiment. You can see battles and campaigns, Northern France, Rhineland, Ardennes, and Central Europe on there. Good conduct medal, hard to believe if you knew my dad. He was not one for good conduct, he was a rascal. But anyhow, this is his brother, James Kane, who was also in World War II, but James had been going to night school, getting a business degree, and as a result, he was stationed with the Army Air Corps in North Africa, and James helped to set up the financial system for the Army in North Africa, but he was out of the fighting. And my poor dad, who was, tunneling into snowbanks to sleep while, his friends were losing toes to frostbite and dying on the battlefield, shows some resentment in his letters home that James is basking in the sun in Northern Africa. That's James home with his mother, my grandmother on the left, and Julia Agnes Kane, and his sister, my Aunt Helen, on the right, my dad's oldest sister. After the war, my father benefited, again, being a poor kid, benefited from the GI Bill to go to Boston University and get a degree in public communications, radio broadcasting. He was just starting out in radio when TV was invented. And he got a job initially in Boston, Massachusetts for WBZ, doing the weekend Supreme Wine News. And my mother went out and bought a television set. They were living in an apartment in Boston. She was the first person on her block to have a TV, just so she could watch my dad. He later had a long career as a TV and radio newsman. He was on TV in Boston, in Providence, Rhode Island, in Binghamton, New York. And then for many years, he was a newscaster for the ABC radio network, which at the time in the mid to late 60s and early 70s, every rock station in the United States, just about during the era of, the greatest era ever for rock music, carried AP contemporary news, 5 minutes of news every hour. So very often I would walk into a store and I would hear my dad's voice because they would be playing the music soundtrack. Oddly enough, my mother, being Irish, was very superstitious. And when my dad got that job, even though he moved from TV to radio, and you would think radio is less, impressive than TV, but he got a huge salary boost when he was with ABC. And for some reason, she was not able to hear him for, a month or so after he got that job. So then she got superstitious about it. And whenever his voice came over the radio, she would like run out of a store if she heard him. It made things very awkward for a while. But anyhow, I'll read you his obituary, his Associated Press obituary. Edwin J. Kane, 76, veteran Associated Press broadcaster. Edwin J. Kane, a veteran broadcaster who spent the final 24 years of his career with the Associated Press radio network in Washington, died at his home in Reston. His death, October 19th, at age 76, was a result of lung cancer, his family said. During a 39-year career, Mr. Kane interviewed Presidents Nixon and Johnson and covered the national political conventions. A native of Somerville, Mass., Mr. Kane fought in World War II, graduated from Boston University, and began his broadcasting career at WRJM Radio in Newport, Rhode Island. His first television job was with WBZ-TV in Boston, where he narrated the evening news from 1953 through 1960 and was nominated for a Peabody Award for his reporting on a documentary about the mentally ill. Mr. Kane was news director and anchorman at WNBF TV Binghamton from 1960 through 1963, then moved to WPRO TV in Providence, Rhode Island, where as anchorman he won the Alfred P. Sloan Award for a year-long series on automobile safety that he wrote and produced long before Ralph Nader, I might add. My dad did that series on automobile safety. He anchored newscasts on ABC Radio starting in 1967 before joining the AP network as anchorman for hourly newscasts from 1974 to 1980. After retiring, Mr. Kane co-produced and announced Homefront for AP Radio until 1998. And that was funny. Homefront was a little 2-minute segment. He did about 25 of them every month he recorded, but they were on home repair. My father could not hammer a nail in straight, but he would do a lot of research on home repair to come up with these things. And I should have said he had the most beautiful, deep, resonant bass voice that you've ever heard in your life, which is really how he got into radio and TV in the first place. Just a gorgeous voice. When he spoke, people in restaurants would turn around or people would recognize his voice. You can tell I miss him very much. My mother wrote a little bit. She wrote a few little short stories here and there, but my dad, had to write his newscasts, multiple newscasts, every day. Keep, rewriting them every hour on radio for 8 hours. And he wrote the scripts for those documentaries. He was a wonderful writer. And all three of us daughters wound up one way or another dealing with words. This is my sister Cindy on the right, Cindy Kane. Cindy is a children's book author. She's won a bunch of awards for her children's books. She works with illustrator Susan Roth, and they do books about endangered species whom people have made efforts to help bring back. They've done one on green parrots in Puerto Rico, prairie dogs, and their latest one is on Hawaiian butterflies, butterfly for a king. So that's my little sister Cindy. This is my sister Susan Kane. Susan was the longtime editor of Baby Talk magazine out of New York City. She won a National Magazine Award, a Clara Booth Luce Award during her tenure there. It's a magazine that every American woman who has a newborn baby up to about a year old automatically would get a subscription to this magazine. And back when she was editor, whenever there was national baby news, like breastfeeding versus bottle feeding, or one time there was a survey that said that most women, if they had the choice, would choose not to have children if they could make the choice and do it again. But whenever there was national news, Susan would wind up on the morning talk shows. And so she's very poised, very articulate. And let me show you this. When she was editor, she put this photograph of, she had, of course, the choice of what the cover was going to be, but she put this image of a nursing mother on the cover, and it caused a national scandal. There was outrage. There were 4,000 letters received about this cover, 1,000 of them angry and canceling their subscriptions. If you see, I mean, my God, what is offensive about this cover? But Susan, true to, she's not one to mince words. When she was interviewed about it, she said, well, it's not like they have, it's not like the woman has tassels on them that she's twirling, So anyhow, she also was the first editor ever to put a person with Down syndrome on the cover as a cover model. She put a little baby with Down syndrome on her cover, beautiful child. And this, I want to mention my niece, Dale Trumbore, who's Cindy's daughter. Dale is a musical composer. She's in her early 30s now. She composes mainly for choruses. She's done, things for piano concerto and full orchestra and string quartets and all that. But she loves the human voice most of all. She's had premieres, all over the world, the country, lots of residencies. She's amazingly talented. And I tell her that she gets it from the O'Kanes. That's where she gets that composition gene, because the great harpist Dennis O'Hampson, who is buried in St. Aydens in Magilligan and who lived in Magilligan for many years, was taught to play the harp when he was 12 years old by Bridget O'Kane. And also Rory Dow O'Kane, who was the great harper and composer, who it's not confirmed, but it's believed that he composed the tune for Londonderry Air, which is probably better known as the tune for Danny Boy, another O'Kane composer in the background. Whether or not he did Londonderry Air, he composed many other wonderful, wonderful tunes. So that's Dale. And thanks, thanks to the O'Kanes of County Derry for her talent. And this is me. This was when I was Louisiana Poet Laureate, State Poet Laureate from 2011 to 2013. What I'm holding out there in the second picture is my poetic license. You've all heard of poetic license. I actually had one laminated in my wallet from the Secretary of State. So whenever anybody said, oh, do you have a poetic license? I'd whip it out and say, I most certainly do. That was a lot of fun traveling around the state, whenever anyone asked me, giving readings and talks and meeting people and kind of trying to promote poetry and the writers of Louisiana. These are my 5 books. I also got, 2 poetry chapbooks. I co-wrote a memoir of Vietnam with a Vietnamese naval officer named Kim Do, and I've edited some volumes of poetry, but these are my 5 single-authored books, and the last one published in 2020 was Mothers of Ireland, and that one actually came out of, as you can see, about 10 years ago, I suddenly got the genealogy bug and wanted to find out more about my relatives, my ancestors from Ireland and Northern Ireland, and that process influenced the poems in that most recent book. And I'll end by just reading maybe 4 or 5 poems, if that's good, if we have time. This is a photograph. Is that?
Yeah. Yes, go ahead. Read your poems. You're okay. Hello. Julie, I think your internet crashed there, but we were all enjoying that. If you can try to come back on. It should be on probably a wee minute. We'll just wait for her. So if anybody has any questions for John or Julie, if you put them in the wee question and answer button there at the bottom of the screen, the Zoom screen. Hopefully Julie will be around in a minute. Well, just before she comes on, at the start of the Julie's talk, she put up a picture of the bishop's temple with her towards Bulge and Magilligan. You know, so I'll have to send her a photograph of the actual Montreal Tower, which was built during the Napoleonic Wars. The bishop's temple was built, I think it was built in 1830. I'm not too sure. Maybe Fiona would know. No, I think it was 1770s where it's built for the bishop's girlfriend.
That was a bit controversial there, Stephen. Bishop's girlfriend. We've got a question here. We've got a question here. Someone's asked whether we can explain what a townland means, whether it's a political term for a piece of land. No, it's not. It's actually a unit of land that's specific to Ireland, and it's the smallest unit. And when we're doing genealogy research, if someone has got that townland name, we can literally pinpoint where the ancestors were from. So often it gets lost when people leave the country, but it really is an important piece of information. Have we got any other questions?
I'll just see if Julie's trying to reconnect. Well, she says she's lost her internet. So maybe I was going to ask about Gilkin and their silent films, how many she made, you know, but it looks like I'm not going to be able to. But I suppose we better just wrap it up there, maybe. If I'll see if John wants to say something before we go. Maybe John's away as well. Well, there's Julie back now. Okay, Julie, there you are.
All right, I'm on my phone. Okay. Let me see if we can prop it up here. Whoop. All right. Yeah, I don't know what happened there. Oh, well, behind me is the piano in question. And it was the proudest possession of the Kane family. It was really the only nice thing that they owned. And as you saw in the picture of me and my dad when I was a baby, you know, if there was a family photo to be taken, they'd get in front of that piano. But when the last of the Kanes died in Boston, I called a used piano dealer to have it appraised, and he laughed at me and he said, if you pay $200, we'll haul it away. I said, what? No. So I spent way too much money to have it moved down here to Louisiana, even though it's essentially worthless. It has tremendous sentimental value for me. I'm just going to read about 4 poems, but the first one is called Player Piano. Common as dirt, the TVs of their time, the used piano man in Boston sniffs at my grandmother's 2020s player piano as I itemize the house, executrix, insulting the Kane family heirloom that I thought would make us rich. Its wood veneer now black as the mold on Irish potatoes that brought all our sorry forebears here to work in factories or drive a team on holidays to sing and get besotted around the piano my grandmother bought. Its flat valves and leather bellows rotted, but still amazingly in tune. One key gone soundless as at the appraisal, me. And I'll read one other little sonnet. It doesn't have to do with my family, but people seem to like this one. It's called Used Book. Sadly, it's true. What luck, an open bookstore up ahead as rain lashed awnings over Royal Street, and then to find the books were secondhand with one whole wall assigned to poetry. And then, as if that wasn't luck enough, to find between Jarrell and Weldon Keys, the blue on cream familiar backbone of my chapbook, out of print since '83. Its cover very slightly coffee stained, but aging all in all, no worse than flesh through all those cycles of the seasons since its publication by a London press. Then, out of luck, I read the name inside, the man I thought would love me till I died. Just probably 2 more. This one is Maraschino Cherries. My dad, Edwin Kane's favorite drink was the Manhattan, which had a little bit of cherry juice and a maraschino cherry in it. We 3 girls always wanted the cherry, and you know, whoever got a cherry, the other 2 had to have one too. So we had to drink Manhattans in multiples of 3. Maraschino cherries. And 1 could put you under the table. let me say that about Manhattans. Maraschino cherries. 3 little girls on the morning after, out in the kitchen poking around for cherries soaked in whiskey like a bomb of grown-up secrets. Other times we found by mom's clipped earrings and kicked off shoes, blue glass monkeys on swizzle sticks, doll-sized oriental parasols, cocktail napkins with jokes we didn't get. Cherries as precious as Burmese rubies. Once in a while the grown-ups slept, we ate our fill of cherries from the jar, but even then, we liked the booze ones best. And I'll wind up with one from the new book. This is about John O'Kane from Ireland's wife, Sarah Brown's brother, Gregory Brown Jr. And it's St. Joseph's No. 2, New Orleans, a cemetery in that city. Dealers are trilling their lookout alarms as I enter the city of the dead, row after row of gleaming marble tombs in the middle of a bad neighborhood. I'm looking for Kate and Gregory Brown, who died a day apart of yellow fever, vomiting blood as black as coffee grounds on Bourbon Street in the French Quarter. Gregory was 30, Kate 25. They would have been married 2 years at Christmas. No record if they left behind a child, my flesh and blood raised by charity sisters. What drew them to this fever-ridden port far away from any relative, doubly displaced from Galway and the north? I had the excuse of marrying a native. Foolish of me to think I'll find their names among grand temples to the Creole French. Immigrant victims were dumped in mass graves covered with lime in shallow dirt trenches. Better get out of here before I'm robbed or find my Prius with the windshield smashed. Not even rented space in oven vaults for poor Irish victims of Yellow Jack. A pity no one searched their rented room, found an address, let distant family know. All those years believing I was far from home, so close to my great-granduncle's bones. Thank you so much.
That was brilliant, Julie. It's fascinating to talk about your own family from Magilligan here. Have we a question here about Gail Kane? How many films did she was she in?
How many?
How
What was
many,
that?
How many films was she in? Do you know?
I'm sorry, the sound on my phone is bad. I'm sorry. How many poems?
No, how many films was Gail Kane in?
How many poems was Kilkin?
No, how many films? How many films? How many pictures was Gail Kane in?
Was, oh, I'm so sorry. The sound is just
There's
breaking
your
up here.
sister's answered it in the chat there.
Oh,
Well,
let
she
me
has
see if I
answered.
can get the chat on the phone. Okay, let's see if I can get it on my phone here. I could get it on my computer, but chat. Okay. Oh, expected more on Steinbeck. Okay. Okay. Oh, how many silent films was she in? Yes, about 20 altogether. Yes, about
Okay.
20 films altogether.
And what was her biggest film? Do you know?
Her biggest film, gee, I'm not sure. Let's see if I wrote it down. You can Google her,
Yeah.
Gail Kane, and find information. Let's see. Yeah, I didn't write down the names here.
But she was pretty popular, wasn't she?
Yeah. Apparently, you know, she was big at the box office. You know, they kept hiring her to star, and she was, you know, she was a star. Her photograph is in the posters as the lead actress. I haven't been able to see any of them. You know, I don't know if the films are preserved, you know, if they're still, you know, if the film itself is still, you know, has it deteriorated, or is it still, you know, able to be viewed, or have they transferred it, you know, to video so we can watch it? But I'm hoping to find out.
Okay. And tell us, what first veered you into doing poetry? Was it something you were good at school, or was it your father?
Oh, good question. Just from the time I was very little, I loved it. You know, I would take every year at school on the first day of class, we would get an English book that would have, you know, poems and stories and things in it. And I would take it home and I would read every poem in it, you know, for the first day. I didn't care about the rest of it, but just every poem. And I started writing them when I was very young. I don't know why, you know, as my father said once, have you ever seen a want ad for a poet? It's not a very wise path to take in life, but it, you know, it drew.
You're breaking up there again. So I think
Yeah.
Unless Fiona has any more questions there, maybe we should wrap it up for tonight. Fiona, maybe?
Not so much of a question, but really well done, Julie. I know how difficult it is to cover so many families and go from Ireland across to America. You've done a lot in the time, so really well done. And we look forward to welcoming you to Magilligan soon as well.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the rest of your family, of course, if they want to come with you.
Thank you.
So that's really us from Trasnatira, Limb Valley Area Ancestry, and Reclaim the Enlightenment. Thank you to Julie Kane and John Gray for chatting to us tonight, and we welcome you again next Wednesday for our next talk. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in tonight. It was a very good audience.